Welcome to Animation for All. My name is Nathan Adams. I am your host. This program is presented to you by Shamble Studio.
Top of the morning to ya. In this tutorial we'll be talking about making a pot of gold. It's about the luck of the Irish. And this being the month of March, I hope you enjoy this and you learn something new about making the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So how was that for a nice hokey Irish accent? In honor of the St. Patrick's Day celebration, which we have over here in America, as well as Ireland, well, I thought I'd do a St. Patrick's Day themed tutorial. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to make a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow like we showed at the very beginning with that toon style rendering. So first of all, we have the default cube. We're working in Blender 2.69, and let's get ourselves started. We are going to be doing Blender Render for our rendering engine. So first of all, let's delete the default cube. All right, and now let's add a plane. This will be our ground object, and let's tab into edit mode. So press tab, press S for scale, and I'm going to scale it up 32 times. That should be good. Tab out of edit mode. And now, in this particular scene that we're doing, I'm doing the source file, which is available at shamble.blogspot.com/this episode. So I will have a link for it under the YouTube video for those of you watching on YouTube. All right, so here you can see we have a list of materials already ready for us. So let's go ahead and let's put in the ground. Next thing we'll do is let's add a UV sphere. Shift A. Let's go to Mesh, UV sphere. Now, I'm going to take this from 32 to 64, and this one from 16 to 32. So we'll be doubling it. And let's also double the size. All right, and now I'm going to tab into edit mode again. I'm going to press G, Z, 2. There we go. And now, this object right now is called sphere. We want to change that from sphere to pot. I know, doesn't that sound hilarious? All right, and also while we're on the subject, we have the material pot already taken care of. I'm sure plenty of people are getting a good laugh out of this, but anyway, it'll make sense in a moment. So, next thing we do, go to, actually first of all, we want to copy that name, Control C while hovering over that, Control V while hovering over that. Same with the object data. There we go. Now, what we can do is we can go into the top of our sphere, and we're going to take some of these vertices out. So we'll go to that central vertex, delete vertices. We'll do the same with this edge ring, or rather edge loop. There we go. We'll do this to a few of these edge loops. All right. Alt, right click, vertices. A couple more of these edge loops and I think we should be good. So we get ourselves a nice open pot at the top. All right, so there we go. Now we have a nice open pot at the top. And now what we can do is let's grab these vertices, G, Z, and just pull them up a little bit. And now let's scale them out. S. There we go. All right, and I'm going to add a couple of vertex, edge loops into this. Let's add about 3. Escape there. All right, if we Alt right click that, scale inward a little bit. There we go. Let's do the same for here. That way our pot kind of flanges out a little bit. All right, there we go. And I actually want to take that in just a little bit. Kind of flares a little much there, don't you think? There we go. All right, now we tab out, and you'll notice we have these flat looking faces on here. Let's go ahead and let's change the shading to smooth. There we go. Next thing we do is go over to our modifiers, this little wrench icon, and let's add the modifier solidify. Right now you can't see a whole lot of what's going on with the solidify. Let's take it to 0.1. See how we look there? And now we actually have a lip around it. Now we can use this for our pot object. Okay. And just as a final thing that we ought to do, let's tab back into edit mode. Okay, we can't really see anything here, so let's go to our wireframe. All right, and let's turn on proportional editing by pressing O. And we're going to pull this up on the Z axis. Let's take it up a number that we can remember it by. We'll say 0.2. There we go. All right, and now we have a bottom to this. It's kind of flattened out so this can actually sit on our ground plane surface. So let's select all the all of the vertices, I should say. Turn off O for proportional editing, and let's pull that back down. -0.2. There we go. All right, and then let's get out of there. Let's go back into our shaded mode, Z. There we go. Or rather solid in this case. All right, and there we have our pot that we can start putting the objects for the coins to go into, and also for the rainbow to appear. And so we're going to do a few more steps in addition to what we already have to make this so that this pot appears, the coins come in, and the rainbow also comes appearing as well. All right, we've created our pot now, and now we can go into our next item on the scene, the rainbow. So what we'll do is we'll add a circle by pressing Shift A. And here we go, we'll do a circle. Now I want this to be the radius of this plane right here, and that's 32. Actually it's 64, but the radius is going to be 32. And I want the vertices to go from 32 to 128. So we'll take that to 128. The radius will increase to 32. There we go. And then let us put together the object name, rainbow. Control C while hovering over that. Control V. Try and keep it all matching. And then what we'll do is we'll rotate this about the x-axis. So you press R to rotate. X, 90 degrees. And then let's pull it over by pressing G, X, -32. And that puts the end of that rainbow right in the pot. And now we can tab into edit mode. Tab that. And then what we want to do is let's turn it into orthographic mode. So what we do is on the numpad, we press 5, and that way we have orthographic. And then we can go scroll around, orbit, and then if we press Alt, that actually snaps us into the front ortho. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take these bottom vertices. We're not going to need them. So press A to deselect all of them, and then press B for box select. There we go. X, delete vertices. Now, we don't need all of this in our scene. We don't need all these vertices, so I'm going to get rid of another quarter of these, or rather I should say another half of these. So let's press B, and then let's get rid of these vertices over here. Press X, vertices, so that deletes those vertices now. And then let's press the Alt button and right click on this edge loop. And then we'll press E to extrude. And I'm going to take this extrusion on the Y-axis, and I'll do it 2 units. Press Enter, and then we'll deselect, reselect by pressing A twice, and then pressing G to grab that on the Y-axis, -1, since we did this 2 units and we want this recentered. And then let's tab out of edit mode. And then I'm going to set the shading on this to smooth. Now, since we have our rainbow object, we need to give it a color. Else, if we were to do the scene, let's go into our camera view. And by the way, you can see only the pot right now. You really can't see that rainbow. So I want to do a couple of things. First of all, let's add a tracking point for this camera to focus on. So let's give it an empty. There we go. And I can't quite see that at the moment. However, we have the size. We can increase that to say 3. We'll do that. And then we'll select this camera and select, not the plane. We got the empty now. Okay, we'll press Z to get the shading mode there. Okay, that one and that one. Control T to do a track to constraint. That way, the camera will always be tracked to this object. So no matter where we go in the scene, press G. Oh, there it goes, and it's now tracking to it. Everywhere you need it. Okay? There we go. And now, let's just press the G, Z, and let's move that up a little bit. That way, we can see the pot of gold. There we go. And I'm going to zoom this out a little bit, and to do that, I'm going to press the G key on here to move the camera, and we'll press Z not once but twice, and then we can zoom out just so we get a good glimpse of this rainbow emptying into the pot. G double Z again. There we go. And then let's press Z just so we get out of our shading, or rather our wireframe mode. Now this object, if we were to do a rendering right now, we press F12. Not really anything we're seeing right now, right? You can see this shadow, which is actually stylized. I've provided the node set up so that we can have this kind of stylized hat shading. But you can see here that there's really no color to this rainbow, so we need to fix that. Let's get out of there. And then we'll go to our materials panel. And then we're going to select rainbow. There we go. And that rainbow, if we were just to press F12 right now, you'll notice all this really funky shading going on. Not quite something we want there, is it? No rainbow looks like that. That would just be silly and psychedelic. Though it might be kind of fun, but nevertheless, this is not the result we want. So now what we do is we have to check, is it involved with a UV type of mapping? And we can see that yes, this is with UV mapping. And so what we need to do is we need to tab into our edit mode, and if we press U, we can unwrap. Now with that, we tab out of edit mode again. Now let's see what the rendering looks like. Okay, well, not quite that silly thing going on, but it's still not right. So what we need to do is we need to go into our UV editing. All right. So if we go into UV editing, there we go. And let's pull up this rainbow image. Okay, so we can see this rainbow image right here. And if we were to look at our rainbow, let's tab into there, and it disappeared. So let's look at that again. There we go. Now we get an idea where our UV stuff is. So we can see, yes, it's not exactly in the right place where we want it. But what we can do is we can rotate those UVs by pressing R. And then let's press 90. There we go. Now if we grab this, move it over by pressing G and then X, so we get on the X-axis. Let's center it approximately SX, and that'll get us to move that about the X-axis, GX. Okay, scale it up just a little bit more on the X. I'm pressing the Shift key. That was not the right idea yet. There we go. All right, and then we press SY, and now that allows us to stretch it in the Y direction. SY again, until we fill up the entire image, or at least close to it. All right, and now if we tab out, and if we press F12 again to do the rendering, now we have exactly what we're looking for. But it's still casting that annoying shadow. That's not something that we want, so we need to fix that as well. So if we go over, let's just go back into default. And then this material, we need to go down into our options. And you see this option traceable. Traceable is where it includes this object in the shadow calculations and thus casts a shadow. So let's turn that option off. There we go. And then, in addition, we want to go to shadow. And this object, we're not going to have receive shadows, so let's uncheck that. And now let's press F12. And now you'll see that rainbow is no longer casting that shadow that was not needed in this scene. And now we have that option taken care of. And we'll go a little bit further in getting the alpha shading in this. So stay tuned for that. All right, now into this segment where we're going to animate our materials and also check the lighting on our scene. If we do a quick rendering, we press F12. We notice this shadow on the ground. And it's a lengthy shadow, and I don't necessarily want it there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to relocate this lamp. To do that, I'm going to first change it to a spot lamp. And then I'm also going to track it to this object, the empty. Control T, there we go. And if I select this camera, Shift S, cursor to selected, then I press Shift S, selection to cursor. There we go. And then I can Shift Control and then Control P, set parent to object. There we go. So now we have this set up so that this camera can move. You can press G, and there we go. So move it around, and no matter what happens, the lamp is always going to follow. All right. Next thing we'll do is we need to look at our scene again. Press F12. You'll notice the scene looks rather flat and boring. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to make this toon style. And to do that, we already have, if we look in our settings, that freestyle has been enabled, but nothing is showing up. The reason why is that as we go to our render layers with our freestyle edges, this is set up so that we have a group included. The group is called freestyle. The same applies to the crease. So now, if we add these objects, I want to add everything but the rainbow to this freestyle edge. I'll add this object to group. So we say add to group, freestyle. Same thing with this group, add to group, freestyle. Now if we do a quick render of that, then we see our freestyle edging. Everything but the rainbow has it now. And that's exactly as I wanted on this scene. So now that that's set up, we have our freestyle edging, our shading is correct. Now the next thing we need to do is we're going to have this pot of gold fade into the scene. And I want to do this in a 2-second span. And so to do that, I don't want it to exactly go straight from a 0 to a 1 alpha. But what I want to do is I want to delay the fading in effect and then have it a little bit more suddenly appear. So we're going to start it at frame 30 for this effect. So if we scroll over here on our timeline, we'll do frame 30. Then we go to our material, and this material will go into our transparency. Where is it? There it is. Z transparency. Let's set this alpha to 0. And then press I to insert a keyframe there. And now I'm going to go to frame 49. And then I'm going to set this alpha to 1. Insert a keyframe there by pressing I. And then that should take care of that. But now if we render this scene at frame 49, let's do F12 to render this. All right, there we go. Not a problem there. So we have everything there, but let's go to frame 1. This is where the pot of gold is non-existent. And there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow right there. Now the way that we're going to want to have this scene, the way that I'm doing this is that we're going to fade in the pot of gold and then the rainbow comes in, not the other way around. So now that's where we start working on the rainbow. The rainbow, we will do the same thing with the transparency value, setting it at 0 for its alpha. But instead of having it fade in exactly uniform like we're going to be doing with the pot, we want to have an effect where it adds in. And so that's where we go into our texture. And in this scene, there's provided the fade texture. So this is of type blend. Then what we want to do is go to our mapping, go from generated to UV. All right. And then we're going to change our influence from color to alpha. There we go. And now what we can do is we can start to play with the intensity of this texture. And to do that, what we'll do is we'll set our contrast to 4 and set our brightness to 2, just to give you an idea of how this is going to look. If we press F12 again, it's still showing up as being uniformly opaque. So to fix this, what we do is we change our size from 1 to -1 so that we can reverse this. Now if we press F12, now you'll see a much more drastic effect of our object fading in that subtle fashion like we'd like it. Now you'll notice, however, that the lines cut out right here. That's something that we don't want to have, but in our compositing, you'll notice that we have a layer 2 set up, and what that does is it's just going to have layer 2 show up on that, where the rest of the stuff will show up on all the other layers. So what we're going to do is this rainbow we're going to move by pressing M2, and then if we press Shift 2, then it comes back on. And now let's do another rendering where we have this object in that layer. And now you can see all the line work right there. Now that we have that set up, let's animate this texture so that it does something just like that pot of gold. And we're going to start our keyframes after the pot of gold has completely appeared. So we'll go to frame 49. That is where the alpha of the pot of gold is at 1. We're going to set the brightness to 0. Then we'll insert a keyframe by pressing I on the brightness and the contrast. And then we will skip ahead to frame 97 and give it 2 seconds of fade in time. Now we'll set the brightness to 2 and the contrast to 0. We'll press I on each of those so that now we have our keyframe for each. And that is how we're going to animate our textures and bring the animation to life for our materials, our objects, everything. Okay, this is the last stuff we have to do. We need to enable a particle system. And to do that, we're going to create an object to be our particle. We're going to duplicate something so that it can go into our pot of gold, because we're going to be using a cheat method to make it so that it gives us what we want, not what the computer simulates. Because honestly, you get a lot more control out of it, and I did not find any way that the computer simulated in any way that I found desirable. Now, this is the method that I'm going to be using. If you have any comments, anything that's different from what I'm going to be showing you, please let me know by going to shembull.blogspot.com/potagold. All right? And so here's what we'll do. First of all, we need to go into our storage layer. This is what I'm calling it. So I'm going to press Alt, number 0, and I'm going to create a very quick coin object. Nothing too fancy. It's just going to be something that's going to be our gold. So first of all, Shift C, and then we'll press Shift A, Mesh, Circle, and then let's bring up our toolbox. The radius I'm going to put at 0.25. There we go. Fill type, triangle fan I'm going to make it. I'm going to give it a material. That'll be gold. Let's Control C and make the object name and the mesh data name as the same. Let's take all these vertices, extrude them up by pressing E, Z, 0.125. There we go. And then what we'll do is we'll take the shading to smooth. There we go. And then I'm going to make sure that the origin is correct. So we'll say origin by pressing spacebar, set origin, geometry to origin. Now we're going to take this exact particle object that we're going to be using. So again, this is going to be a mesh that's going to be used as a particle. And we're going to duplicate that into another layer. We're going to put this back into layer 1. Before I do that, let's get this to added to a group. And let's see, there we go. Add to group, freestyle. That way any instance that is duplicated from this is going to be in that same group. Shift D, escape out of that, press M, and move it to layer 1. There we go. Now let's press 1 and then Shift 2, and then that gets our layers 1 and 2 back online. And then let's move this object, gold.001, up by pressing G, Z, and we'll bring it to the top of this gold pot. All right. Another thing we need to do is we need to make sure that our material is separate from the original gold object. The reason why we're going to do this is we want to control the fade as to how this is going to come in. These particles are going to be coming from above, and then they're going to gradually appear that they are actually filling up the pot, when in reality they're not doing anything of the sort, and this layer's already been created and it's just going to fade in. That's all it's going to do. So that's my fade. Pretty sweet, huh? So I'll show you how to do this. We'll do it really quickly. All right, and first of all, okay, here we go. This number 4, right next to gold, we'll press that. Gold.001, I'm going to get it to gold.fade. There we go. And then I need to add 2 more objects. First of all, an emitter, mesh, plane, and I'm going to get another one that's going to be, actually first of all, I want to make sure that that is in our side view. Press Z so that we can see all the wireframe geometry. Okay. We'll rotate that. There we go. And then let's add another object, which is going to be add curve path. Go into there, tab into edit mode, select all the vertices, press X, and then let's start adding in vertices that where we want them by pressing Control, left click. They do not have to follow the curvature of the rainbow exactly. All they need to do is give you kind of the idea. It's going to be rough anyway. Who said animation had to be perfect? In fact, it's better if it does not have perfection. Anyway, there's enough of my rambling. And now we're going to tab out of there. And we're going to change this so it has a force field. That's the purpose of our curve. From type force to type curve guide. And then all of these particles that come out of this emitter, which we are now going to enable, they are going to follow this curve into that pot of gold. So now let's change this from 1000 to 100. We just want enough so that we can see that there are gold coins going into the pot of gold. We'll change the lifetime to 30. This actually changes the speed of these particles following this curve. And then, if we go back to frame 1, if we press Alt-A, we can see these particles following this path, and they terminate right at the very end of the path, so we wanted it right inside the pot of gold. Okay, but right now they're just little points that are following it, nothing else. And so we need to change our render appearance. And so to go to our render appearance, what we do is we decheck or uncheck the emitter parameter. We go to object rather than halo, and then our duplicate object is going to be gold. The size we're going to change from 0.05 to 1. And there we go. If we were to press Alt-A, then the coins come right on out. And they're filling that pot of gold, so to speak. But, as I said before, they're not actually filling the pot of gold. They end right here at the very end of this curve. So let's press Escape, and we're going to make these objects actually appear to fill this pot of gold. So we press Shift D, Shift Z, then we start to duplicate these. on a single layer. Shift D, Shift Z, Shift D, Shift Z. That way it constrains it just to the X and Y axes, and it does not include the Z axis. Notice I like to do that a lot. And then once we get a good layer of those coins, we're going to add another layer just to make it appear that there's not just the one layer that we're doing. Just a couple more of these up here. And then I think we'll be in business for this layer. Rotate this about the Z-axis. There we go. Take all these gold coins and let's make another layer right below. We want to make sure that we don't have any of these other objects selected. We don't want to be deleting, or rather duplicating, any unwanted extras. All right, I think I got all those. Shift D, Z, and I see I duplicated a couple of unwanted extras. Well, that's easily enough remedied, isn't it? Let's get rid of that one. And let's get rid of that one. You know, I thought I had the right one. Okay, there we go. Now we got rid of the unwanted ones. There we go. Okay, now we have a couple of layers of coins. Last thing we have to do to make sure everything works out as it should is we're going to play through this animation, and we're going to determine when is the best place for it to fade in and fade out, fade in. So let's go to our material. Let's enable transparency. Z transparency is just fine. Let's put it at 0 for our alpha. Okay. And then let's press Alt-A. I just want to make sure that everything's correct here. This fade is one of those things that I'm not going to need, so I'm getting rid of this fade texture. Okay. All right. And then we'll take it to about, let's let it run for a couple more times. Take it to about frame 150 or so. 159 looks good. Let's insert a keyframe right here, I for insert, and then we'll let it play until about frames 200. And we'll say that that's at alpha 1. Insert keyframe. Let it play the rest. There we go. All right. So that'll give us what we need for our animated effect of this appearing to have the gold coins fill the pot. And then we'll do our final render. Now all we have to do is our last minute stuff, so that now all we have to do is prepare our rendering, and then we're done. So a quick tip here, make sure that when you render that you do it in single frames, so meaning like a PNG or a .jpeg. And I would not recommend doing it as a .avi, otherwise you lose all your work if you have one mistake happen, or if you have some kind of a crash, whatever it may be. So there we go. Thank you for watching this Animation for All episode. I really appreciate the time that you take to watch our stuff, and I really appreciate any feedback that you have for any future episodes, anything that you'd like to see, and also for how we did on this episode. To leave feedback, feel free to go to our show and view our show notes at shembol.blogspot.com/potofgold. You can also leave us feedback by going to Twitter and going to twitter.com/shembolstudio. And for Animation for All related stuff, #anim, 4, all. Feel free also to go to Facebook and like us there at facebook.com/shembolstudio. Thank you for watching this episode. Have a great day.